It is your Tuesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day and hope everyone else is doing well out there. Looks like we're going to have a lot of nice weather this week, unless you like it hot. I don't love it super hot, so a bunch of days in the low to mid 70s. I will take that in a heartbeat. Comfortable to be outside. Comfortable to be inside, too, wherever you're listening to this. Thanks for listening. Hey, and just a reminder, if you don't mind, go and give the show a rating wherever you listen to it. Just give it a little rating. You don't have to do a review, but a review would be great, too. But if you can rate the show, especially if you love it, if you hate it, maybe don't review it, maybe don't rate it. But if you love it, which you probably do if you're listening right now, give it a review. It just helps with search, things like that. So a reminder, that would be helpful if you have the chance sometime in the next day or two or whenever you think of it next. Good show coming up today. Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, joins me here in just a little bit, talking mostly football with Chip. Both Gophers and Vikings was on my brain this week. Gophers right in the middle of camp. Same with the Vikings. Gophers a few weeks away from kicking off their season. Viking season officially starts a little bit later than that, but first preseason game Saturday. Only home preseason game this year. Saturday against the Raiders. How much will we see J.J. McCarthy? How much will the Vikings run the ball this season? Will the Gophers finally pass the ball? How many wins are these teams going to have? All of those questions on the table when Chip and I talk here in just a few minutes. Also, an Olympics thought at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Don't do it. Don't do this, David Festa. Don't do it. I'm not ready for it. Twins, rookie pitcher, 5 shutout innings against the Cubs on Monday night at Wrigley Field. 3-0 win for the Twins. They've now won 5 games in a row. Cleveland lost. Kansas City lost, which matters too in the wild card race and ultimately in the AL Central race. But Cleveland losing is the bigger deal. Cleveland lost 7-6 in 10 innings to the Diamondbacks. So Twins just 3.5 back now in the division race. Lots of time left. 8 games left with Cleveland, including 4 of them coming up here this weekend. But chopping some games off that lead before that series, or at least not falling further behind. But in this case, chopping another game off that lead, a big deal. David Festa, though, the rookie pitcher, had 2 rough outings to begin his career with the Twins, right? Like 5 innings, he gave up like 4 or 5 runs in each of them. You're like, okay, maybe not quite ready. He didn't panic, though. He looked at it and said, you know what? I like the way I'm throwing the ball. I learned a lot of lessons here. Learned the margins are much different here in the majors versus the minors. A lot of these outings come down to just a few pitches. You make a mistake, it's going to get hit out of the ballpark, and then runs are going to score, and you're not going to feel so good about how you did. Lately, though, it's been much better, right? He had that game where he pitched. He was kind of there was an opener, then he was good in his last start against the Mets. 5 innings, 3 hits, just 2 runs. Twins lost that game, and that certainly was not David Festa's fault. Yesterday, 5 shutout innings, like I said, 9 strikeouts. That means in his last 14 1/3 innings, spanning 3 appearances, he has 22 strikeouts and just 9 hits allowed, 3 runs. The stuff looks good. David Festa looks good. So what's the problem? I'm not ready to give up on my frustration that the Twins didn't add a pitcher at the trade deadline. I really thought that this team was one good starting pitcher short of being an actual contender in October. I thought, last year they brought Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray to the top of the rotation, to the top of the playoffs, and that was absolutely the key to advancing in the playoffs, to finally winning a game and then finally winning a series in the playoffs. What were the scores against the Blue Jays were 2-0, 3-1, I think were the 2 series scores. Aside from Sonny Gray's rough start in Game 3 of the division series against Houston, they were set up. They were set up to win because of their starting pitching. Now, they let Sonny Gray go in free agency this season, $25 million to pitch for the Cardinals on a long-term, 3-year deal. I don't think, I didn't expect them to match that, but because of payroll constraints, things like that, you looked at it and you said, okay, they've got what they've got right now. Still got Pablo Lopez, paying him pretty nicely. He had a rough first half of the season, but he's pitching better now. Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober still on team-friendly, early career contracts. That's the first three in your rotation. All three of those guys look like capable playoff starters right now. Maybe not as good as what you had last season when you had two veterans at the top who were dealing, but good enough to make you feel okay about where you are. But if you could bump one of those guys or get a fourth in there, you're going to need that beyond a wild card round. Look, listen, the Twins are hoping to avoid the wild card round this year, by the way, because if they are to win the division this season, it's more than likely, almost a guarantee, that they would be, one of the top two division winners instead of the third best division winner last year. The third best division winner last year out of three had to play in that wild card round. Twins got through it just fine, but this year, if they overtook Cleveland, they almost certainly would have probably the second best record, even the best possibly, but at least the second best record in the AL, get a bye to the division series. But regardless of the route they take, once you get to the division series, you need a fourth starter. We've talked about this. The rest of the playoffs, you need a fourth starter. That's a best of five. You're going to get to best of seven eventually. There's not enough off days to make it so you can just pitch three. These aren't the old days where guys are pitching on 3 days rest. Just not really going to happen unless you got to like a game 7 of the World Series where all hands are on deck. So you're going to need a fourth at some point, and I just didn't see one on their roster. As good as Simeon Woods Richardson had been to that point in the season, you still had some questions about him, and he's faltered lately. Chris Paddock, I know they like his arm, but he, again, is on the injured list. You don't know exactly what to expect from him. You don't know what his postseason role is going to be. So I really thought, hey, why not get a pitcher at the deadline, a starting pitcher, someone who can be at least a middle of the rotation guy. Don't have to pay him a full year's salary if you're worried about payroll. You just pay him, for 2 months, and life goes on, and you give yourself a better chance to win the World Series. Well, of course, the Twins didn't do that. They added one relief pitcher at the deadline. They called up Randy Dobnak. Again, that was probably more of just a corresponding move for depth and things like that. They didn't just throw Dobnak into the rotation. Dobnak's a great guy, nothing against him, but those were not the splash moves that you wanted to make you think, okay, this team is serious about contending. Now, when I talked to Phil Miller last week, he was like, well, maybe, David Festa can be that guy. And I didn't want to believe it. I don't want to believe it because I still thought they should have done something. Now he goes out and throws another great game. 5 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 9 strikeouts. And you're looking at it and you're like, 2 hits. And you're looking at it and you're like, okay, that's the kind of performance, against a decent team. The Cubs are not a great team, but they're a 500 team. They're a decent team. They're trying to win. You do that against a lineup on the road. You've got all sorts of momentum after beating the White Sox, but you don't get a lot of run support. It was like 2-0, 1-0 for most of that game. So he's got to. Every pitch matters. He's got to execute clutch pitches. Not a playoff atmosphere, but definitely some pressure when you're getting into August. You're trying to catch a team. You're trying to understand that every game counts. So for the Twins, it's a great development if he can keep pitching like this. For me, I'm not ready for it. I don't want to let go of my frustration. I don't want to let go of my anger. I don't want to say, okay, maybe David Festa could be the fourth in a postseason rotation. I'm not ready to say that yet. Long way to go, but I'm not ready to give up my frustration and my anger just yet. So David Festa, you are making this hard on me. Let's talk to Star Tribune columnist Chip Scoggins today. Chip, I think you and I talk football a lot because we both like football and we kind of gravitate towards it, among other things. But it's that time of year. It's training camp, fall camp for the Gophers and Vikings. And it's an interesting year, I would say, for both of them. So I got a bunch of things to throw at you. But first, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mikey.
You are welcome. Thanks for joining me. So yeah, it's just kind of some time on my hands on, what was it? Monday afternoon as we were preparing for this segment. So came up with a few questions for you that we could bandy around today. Some of them kind of having to do with both the Gophers and the Vikings. Some of them had to do with one or the other. So here's the thing, Chip. We've talked about this plenty of times over the years. Gophers talk a good game about wanting to throw the ball more. They've done it, I don't know how many different times. They said they were going to do it last year, and then they ranked like 123rd out of 130 teams, and maybe they tried a little harder and they just didn't have the personnel, whatever it was. But whatever the deal is, they didn't do it. Vikings talked about wanting to run the ball more last year. They kind of geared up for it. They were like, "Oh, we got this plan in place. Alexander Madison, this is how we're going to do it." And then I think they ranked like 27th in rushing, like the year before they were 29th. So my question to you, Chip, is: sounds like both of these teams are trying to do this talk again this year. A, should we believe them? And B, which one of these scenarios is more likely? Gophers become a middle of the pack in FBS passing team, or the Vikings become a middle of the pack, maybe even a little bit better running team this year?
That's a good question. Can we have PJ Fleck and Kevin O'Connell meet for a beer and just embrace and be
Yeah,
like,
just like
show me what you show me how you
show,
do it on the other side.
how do you do that so much? And how do you do that? So how do you commit to this? How do you commit to that? Because they both could benefit from a little bit more balance in their offense,
Yeah.
don't you think?
And I think it's both of their nature as much as it is the personnel that has
Yeah,
driven this. We've
sure.
seen PJ Fleck, if there's an interception, a drop pass, what have you, something that doesn't go right or click for the passing game, he just shuts it down and says, we'll run the ball a million
Yep.
times in a row. O'Connell last year talked a lot in preseason camp about being more efficient with the running game. He never said volume, but it was more efficient. And I think his first year with all the negative runs or
Right.
zero runs with Dalvin Cook drove him crazy. So it's like it wasn't so much he was promising a huge increase on carries, but they wanted to be more efficient.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen.
No, they wanted to get a 2nd and 6, and they just were
Exactly.
getting into 2nd and 6.
I think if I was guessing, I would tend to say I think you'll see a bigger improvement from the running game for the Vikings because of Aaron Jones.
I agree with
And
that. Yeah.
I just think if it's the Aaron Jones that we saw at the end of last year, the last 5 games, particularly in the playoffs, where he gave that Packers offense just a new dimension, and he rushed for 100 yards all 5 games and was really just dynamic after he came back from a pair of leg injuries. And I talked about this, and he also said, I'm a pass catcher. And I think we're going to
Yeah.
see that more than we have
Sure.
in the O'Connell's first 2 years, where you can use him as in the screen game, along with running. So I think it would be a disservice if you have Aaron Jones and he's the version we saw last year, not to be able to use him because he's one of your most dynamic players. So I think that'll change some for O'Connell's offense. Flex, I just don't know, Mike. Everything you hear about Max Rosner, the graduate transfer from New Hampshire, they love all the intangibles, the leadership, just the instincts that he has, the way he carries himself, the leadership. Sounds like in camp, his MO as a quarterback is to get the ball out quick, quick hitting stuff, screens, slants, check downs to running backs. If they can do that.
That's what I saw on all of his tape that I watched from New Hampshire. It's like that's all he was doing. It's like a lot of quick hits, a lot of short throws, but efficient throws.
But you know what? If you can develop a rhythm that way, and if you can get the ball to Darius Taylor and some of these running backs or tight ends, which we just have not seen a lot in flex time here, I think that could be a bonus. I mean, so much of their passing game was so inconsistent, both in the times they, in attempts, but also drop passes, errant passes. I think back to last year in that Wisconsin game. To me, maybe the defining moment was when Calic Manis airmailed a wide open, I think it was Elijah Spencer along the sideline on a pass you have to have. Third down.
Randy Johnson's brought
open,
that play up a few times. Yeah.
And the look on PJ's face, it was like, man, this is game 12. We can't even convert that pass.
Yeah.
I think if you can just get in a rhythm with your passing game, we're not talking about, airing it out and throwing the ball 40 yards down the field. I think that'll be a big step forward. So we'll see if he can do it. If that's part of it, I just need to see Max Brosman more. I haven't even seen him practice. I'm going to go out there Tuesday. There's an open practice. I kind of want to just see from my own eyes, like how this looks, how's it going. And look, he was highly decorated at New Hampshire, but he just has to show he can make that transition to Big Ten.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious about it, and I think we can. The body of work is bigger, but we can give somewhat of you can look at personnel and say, hey, the Gophers have had, Mo Ibrahim and they had Darius Taylor, like some of their best players have been running backs, and the identity of the coach. Kevin O'Connell had, Kirk Cousins for those 2 years or most of those
Sure.
2 years, and he had Justin Jefferson. He had rookie Jordan Addison last year, TJ Hawkinson. Like the side of the ball or the way they're going to move the ball, they probably had more talent in one way. It was just neither one of them seemed confident, at least by the end of the season, in what they were doing with running for the Vikings or throwing for the Gophers, and their tendencies crept back into that.
Well, that is. I mean, they both of them. Um, that's where it goes back to, I think, who they are, what their philosophical approaches, and particularly when things get stressful. And we've
Yes.
seen it with PJ. Like he is just, the personnel just hasn't uh, given him the confidence to stay with it when there are struggles. I mean, how
Right.
many times do we see? And it's kind of a chicken egg thing with let's stick with PJ, chicken and an egg thing, because how many like drop passes do we see their wide receivers have last year? It just seems
Yeah.
throw the ball so infrequently that when they do have a drop pass, it just seems magnified. Um, and how much was it? Their drops were indicative of because they're not getting in a rhythm. Like
Right.
you lose focus because when if receivers and quarterback, I'll use this comparison. The passing game cannot be a light switch. You can't just
No.
like turn it on when you need it. Like it's something you have to nurture and develop. You have to have that rhythm and chemistry and all those things that go into it. And when it's happening so infrequently, you just wonder if the receivers and quarterbacks lose their sharpness. So I want to see if Max Brosner changes this, if there's just a trust with the coaching staff that he can execute what they're looking for. And so, I don't think either offense is going to be able to maximize what it has if it doesn't become more
Yeah.
if both of them don't become more well-rounded.
How much, this is a little different subject, how much do you want to see, from ranging from not at all, don't need to see him, to quite a bit? How much do you want to see JJ McCarthy play in this one home preseason game on Saturday?
A lot, a
Hmm.
lot. I think the other question is how much are you going to see Sam Darnold?
Right.
I could go back and forth on that one, because I don't think you're going to see the front liner. You're not going to see Justin Jefferson.
No
You're not going to
Jefferson.
see
No.
Darisaw and O'Neal. I would highly doubt that you're going to see
No.
many starters. So does it behoove you to put Sam Darnold in there when you're not, the full complement of people? I don't know. JJ McCarthy, I want to see a lot of. I think the more you can see, the more that's how he develops and grows. And I've been impressed with his camp here lately. I will say he has a strong arm,
Hmm.
and he's confident in his arm, his ability. He makes some tight window throws. He doesn't look like sometimes you would think with a rookie where things are just spinning, 100 miles an hour in his head. Now they might be. We don't know, but he certainly looks confident. I think last week he's had some really good practices, and there's the occasional rookie moment where he makes a bad throw or um, kind of gets burned by something. But I think the more situations he can see in team stuff in practice, in these joint practices they're going to have next week, and then also the preseason game, I would give him as much because you know you know the veterans guy you don't need to see that. The rookie you want to see as much as you can and put him in different kind of situations as much as you're going to see in a preseason game.
Yeah, well, and they're going to have to, like, whatever happens, then if they, let's say he plays like a few series at least, and we get to like at least get a glimpse of like the potential, but also like where he needs work. Like that's the beginning, the real beginning of the managing of the hype train, right?
Well,
Because
it is, yeah.
because they've got to be nervous about how they're going to handle that situation. If he goes and throws a couple touchdown passes, it's not like that's going to change their opinion, but it's going to public opinion starts to form when you actually see him in a game.
Well, and this is where O'Connell, and it's been deliberate and intentional, and you can see like they're trying to tamp down that as much as they can by saying they're not going to speed through his timeline, they're not going to rush anything, not setting any kind of expectations on time frame or anything like that. It's been purposeful, I think, so that they're going to try to say, we're not going to hear the noise. We're not going to hear your shouts to put in JJ, put it, the real test will become, let's say Darnold starts the season and it goes poorly. That's when you're going to hear the,
Yes.
we won JJ, those guys.
It's going to happen the first time he throws an interception at home. Everybody wants to see McCarthy. Like even if Darnold is great, like I guess if he's great, then there'll be less pressure.
They'll be fine. Yeah.
But like if they lose their first home game and they lose like 20-10 and Darnold, even if it's not all his fault, like that's going to be their challenge. They haven't had to deal with this yet, but it starts with this preseason game. It's their only home preseason game. You've been kind of keeping him under wraps. He hasn't been playing with the ones, and maybe that's going to change a little bit and give him some reps with the ones. But like that, they have to be thinking about that in the backs of their minds, though they need to see him too. Like they need to know what they've got in him too.
For sure. I mean, again, it almost feels like O'Connell's been trying to send a message to the masses through the media by saying, this is going to be a process. This is going to be, something we're not going to rush. And so his way of saying, don't scream at me about putting JJ in, even though it's going to happen. And we'll see how he handles it. I mean, again, until you get to a game, nobody's really screaming it because it's practice. No. But and we have no idea. I want to see Darnold. This is a referendum on his career this year too. I mean, I wasn't there Saturday, but it sounds like he had a really good day Saturday and starting to click with Justin Jefferson. And but again, until you're in a game, you really don't know because they're not trying to tackle the quarterback and sack him. So, but I this will be something that O'Connell has to deal with, I'm sure, and will there be some frustration from being asked the millionth time?
Yeah, of course.
At some point, there probably will be, but I don't think that he seems pretty resolute in nothing's going to distract him from or force his hand from doing what he thinks is the best scenario for McCarthy's long-term development and not getting him on the field before then.
Which I think, two things on this before we move on, which I think one means he could very well start the season as the number 3 quarterback if they don't want him to be a play away from going into a game before he's ready. I think he's going to be the number 3 guy.
Well, that's it. Like if they get to the season opener and they feel like, he's making strides, but we just don't think he's ready to run the offense and feel comfortable putting out there. And Sam Darnold goes out there and, heaven forbid, has an injury, in the first series, they're going to put Nick Mullins out there.
Yes.
I mean, they just start. I think that's why Nick Mullins is in this camp because
he's still under contract. Like he's an insurance policy.
Sam Darnold's your bridge. Nick Mullins is your insurance policy.
Yes.
In case for when, as soon as they feel like JJ McCarthy is ready. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that Nick Mullins is going to be part of the equation.
No,
because it just you wouldn't why have him here. So, but they're not going to. They're going to know when that moment is, not us, right?
No,
I mean, they're going to know when they feel comfortable that he would be ready for it. And so, I think Nick Mullins, like you're right, you're 100% right, is the insurance policy in case something happens to Darnold.
Ben Gessling and I have talked about this too. Like the reason they can talk about all these things and say it confidently is Sam Darnold is one of the ultimate cautionary tales for playing too soon, right? He played as a rookie in his first, right away in the season. And I think he was great actually in his very first game. And everyone's like, hey, this is going to be terrific. And then he was overmatched. And like that second year, he was seeing ghosts and he got mono. And then his whole career was basically to this point. Like I said to Ben the other day, is like, you don't want to rush JJ McCarthy. And all of a sudden he's like a reclamation project playing for the Carolina Panthers in 2030. like give him some time and make sure he's ready when he gets out there, as long as you believe that, there's value in waiting instead of just kind of like trial by fire.
No. And I think, and they talked about this too, is like, it's so much about not only timing, but who are you surrounding that quarterback with? Yeah. Now, I think this is in terms of the infrastructure, this is as good as, for Sam Darnold as a starter. Now, obviously, San Francisco, that's a wonderful situation for any quarterback, but he wasn't there to be the starter, and he wasn't ever going to be a starter there, part of their plans. But in terms of when you look at the personnel, coaching, all those things, this is a good spot for a quarterback to be in. And so, but yeah, O'Connell has those. He always talks about, I asked him about it, and he brought it up again, the journey of the quarterback, the journey. And so that's a big thing for him, the journey of a quarterback, how he does it. And so he has seen enough evidence of places where a quarterback was put in a unfortunate situation for, any number of reasons. And he just does not want to do that to McCarthy. And because they need to make this work. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're drafting a quarterback top 10, your legacy in a lot of respects is based on what happens with that quarterback.
ESPN's football percentage index gives the Vikings a 14% chance to make the playoffs this year, projecting their record around 7-10, 6.8 and 10.2. I don't think they're going to go. I guarantee you they're not going to go 6.8 and 10.2, but that's basically 7-10. Does that seem right to you based on what you think about this team? Because it seems pretty right to me, but
yeah, it does, and I think a lot of that's just a reflection of the quarterback, right?
Yeah,
just not knowing what you're getting out of Sam Darnold, and obviously the division's changed dramatically in the last few years. I mean, this division is no joke.
they're the fourth best team right now. Like Chicago looks like they're going to be pretty good. Detroit almost went to the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chicago's,
sure.
They've rebuilt. You got Caleb Williams, and on paper you like what they're doing, but they still have to show up. But I mean, Detroit and Green Bay, I think what they did last year and have built speaks for itself. So this division is tough, and so that makes sense. I think the defense, they fell apart the last month of the season. I think because their personnel could not hold up because of injuries, they couldn't hold up to what Brian Flores was wanting to do. I think they got younger. I think they upgraded, obviously. I think year 2 in the scheme should help. It's just when you go from Cousins to whether it's Darnold or McCarthy, you just can't. I mean, that's a drop now. And the T.J. Hawkinson injury, we'll see how long he misses. That doesn't help. Although I do think, we go back to your original point, I mean, they should be able to run the ball more. I mean, they should be more with Aaron Jones,
Some of it's, too, like, how can they move the pile with their 3 interior linemen, too?
Yeah, that hasn't changed. But, I mean, how do we think about their offense? I mean, obviously the tackles are
good. Yeah.
The interior line still is going to, I don't want to say it's, what do you say, average? Is that
it's close to, it's like, on its, like, if you're being generous, I think they're pretty serviceable. Like, I don't think they're top half, but they're not bottom third. They're somewhere between bottom third and top half.
I would say, in the middle.
Like 18th or 19th. They're fine. They're not your biggest problem, but they're not great.
Yeah. And so if you said, 7-10, I would say probably yeah.
Yeah, which is what they were last year, right? That's where they finished, although it took a creative route to get there.
Yeah, with 18 different starting quarterbacks.
Yes. Well, and we can't forget too, they might be without Addison for a few games this year if he gets suspended.
I think that's
there's
going to be the news that came out about him. I think he's probably looking at a suspension of a couple games here.
So yeah, there's a lot to sort out there. I think if they're going to win, it's going to be a little different than they have. I think you're right. It's going to be if the defense holds up, if they have enough depth and avoid injuries at corner, and if they can run the ball a little bit more to take some of the pressure off of Darnold and the offensive line and McCarthy whenever he plays, they could be better. They might win more games like 20-17 instead of 27-23. Like it's going to be a little bit more low scoring, I think, at least at first, and a little bit more ball control. It might be Zimmer ball. They might be playing some Zimmer ball by the time it's all done.
I don't think we'll ever see, a running back getting 30 carries or,
No.
They're going to pound the ball on the ground. But yeah, you mentioned the secondary with their corners. That's through tragedy and just unfortunate situation. It's been kind of a they're adding guys now, so I don't know how that's going to shake out, but it's obviously a concern, I think, at this point.
final thing, kind of along the same vein. I've seen a lot of over-unders for the Gopher football team. 5.5 seems to be the number. A lot of toss-up games. I think we've talked about that
Yeah.
already. A lot of games where you look at it and you're like, could go either way. Like, wouldn't surprise me if they won 4 games this year. Wouldn't shock me if they won 8 games this year. I'd probably be more surprised by 8 than 4,
Yeah.
but I give them again. It's such a wait and see year for them, and I think you wrote about that the other day.
Yeah, it's I've covered this program pretty closely for 2 decades, and this is I probably have less of a gut feel if you ask me about picking
Yeah,
a final record than any of those because of just so much unknowns. I mean, I think there's a couple games there where you look at it and you're like, yeah, they're going to lose that one, Michigan, Penn State,
right.
and
Yeah,
then they have a couple non-conference, like, okay, those should be wins. But other than that, there's like 7 or 8 games where you're like, yeah, I could see it this way or I could see that way. I
right.
mean, it's some of it is uh, um, just everybody having new quarterbacks and
Hmm.
the transfer portal, and it's so hard to know, before you even see a guy. I mean, we can watch Max Brosmer tape from New Hampshire, but that's not going against
No,
USC so
no.
it's so there's some of that. What do you say, 5 wins? I don't.
5.5. 5.5 is the number.
Yeah,
So
I would probably, if you pin me down, I'd probably say 6, maybe 7 if you win, more of those
yeah,
swing games. But I do think I would start with I think their 2 lines are their strength.
yes, I agree.
I like where they are there. I mean, obviously Darius Taylor's a special talent at running back. Need to keep him healthy and find a complement to him so you're not putting so much on his shoulders. But it really, to me, and I like their defensive line. They have, Ja Joyner. I like Anthony Smith a lot. Dennis Strigow. They got some playmakers there. But again, I think so much of this comes down to how does Max Brosmer assimilate to the Big Ten, and does that allow for a more well-rounded offense? Because they need to get more explosive. They need to get
Yes.
more out of that passing game. So you're not just constantly putting so much pressure on your offense to go 10, 12, 15 play drives all on the ground and trying to score, because you just lower your ceiling when you do that.
I think we'll learn something pretty quick when they play North Carolina. Like I went to that
Yeah.
game out in North Carolina last year. I was there, and it was like you could tell North Carolina was a cut or two above them, and obviously the quarterback was part of that. Drake May
Yeah.
was a
He was the
legit
real deal.
he
Yeah.
was a legit prospect. So they won't have him this year. But if they struggle in the same way and look a little bit overmatched against North Carolina, you might look at some of those Big Ten games differently and say, the games we thought they might have won might be a little tougher. Or if they handle them, you might say, okay, now I feel a little bit differently about them too.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I mean, I covered the game in North Carolina, and obviously Drake May, I mean, you saw why he was a high draft pick. I mean, he
Yeah.
had complete control of the game. The completions he had on third down, it was just, he picked
Hmm.
him apart there. But that game to me came down to a difference in quarterback play. I
Yes.
mean, he made throws and the Gophers quarterback didn't. And so, but without him, and you look at it, it's like, to me, that's a toss-up game,
It
right?
is.
Yeah, I
Should be.
wouldn't sit here and say, yes, this is a win. Yes,
No.
no, that's a loss. I mean, it's a game where you're at home, so you hope you have a little bit of advantage there. But yeah, I mean, it's that would be a good way for them to get off to a start that gives you some momentum and kind of shows what this team can be. But I want to see what this offense looks like with a new quarterback. And we've heard it, like you said to begin with, we've heard it
Hmm.
about being more
Yeah.
them being more aggressive and throwing the ball more. Let's see if that actually comes to fruition this year.
Well, we're going to get to see it soon. Preseason for the Vikings Saturday. That North Carolina game for the Gophers is just a little over 3 weeks away because it's a Thursday night game. Chip Scoggins, appreciate you helping me break down some football today. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Chip. Appreciate him jumping on the show with me today. Yeah, I agree with him in terms of the Gophers, and I'd throw the Vikings into the mix too. This is a hard season to predict for both of them, and mostly it's because you don't know what you're getting at quarterback. I mean, obviously the Gophers have the added wrinkle of no more Big Ten West, increased competition in the Big Ten. But the Vikings, too, like you look at it, you're like, things break a certain way. It wouldn't surprise me to see them win 10 or 11 games. Also wouldn't surprise me to see them win 5 or 6 games. I think something more in the middle, 7 or 8, is probably more likely for the Vikings. Gophers, the same thing. I could see them winning anywhere between 4 and 8 games this year, but I'd probably be more likely to pick 5 or 6. But you don't know what you're getting with either one of these teams, but that's kind of the fun of sports, right? We don't want to know exactly what we're getting all the time. We just want to know that we will be entertained, and we'll see if we are entertained by one or both of these teams for the vast majority of this season. Let's finish with the cooler. Struck me that you could fill out almost an entire Timberwolves lineup with players who are competing in the quarterfinals of the Olympics today. Newest Timberwolf Joe Ingles playing for Australia. Rudy Gobert playing for France against Nickeil Alexander-Walker's Canada team. There's a very big quarterfinal matchup. And, of course, Anthony Edwards playing for Team USA today. So 4 Timberwolves in action in Olympic men's basketball today. I will be watching, hopefully, a lot of that, especially the USA game this afternoon. Hope you will as well. Tomorrow's show should have more Olympics talk with intern Cassidy Hedesheimer, and we'll probably talk more about her internship, just what she's learned about the Twin Cities, what she's enjoyed about her time here, things of that nature. So look forward to that on Wednesday's show. Until then, I am Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.